Good morning, everyone. I know we have people on the East Coast, the West Coast. We have friends in Hawaii. I know Jen Zoga is one of the organizers over in London. Hello, Jen. And anybody in Asia, hello to you too. This afternoon, we have the highway to sales, and we have an illustrious panel of all-stars in the sales. Just to introduce them in a moment, and just tell you a little bit more myself. As I said, my name is Dean Blackman. I'm the founder and principal of 4 New Ventures. I work with women, minorities, and lower moderate income people and other underserved groups doing social impact investing. I also work with venture capital investment managers, helping them to scale and become more institutionalized. And I also work with private investors and institutions, helping them to fulfill the mission-related investments. So, as I said, we have an illustrious panel, and I'll just go around and let everyone introduce themselves, talk about what they do, and any interesting tidbits they have. So I start with Catherine.
Hi, everyone. I am Catherine Rose. I'm founder of WiseHer. We offer a technology solution that powers on-demand expert advice, be it from our network or an internal network for companies and communities. I've been in sales for over 20 years, everything from direct to consumer to enterprise. So this is one of my favorite topics. I'm really thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And then we have Mike Goldenberg.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Goldenberg. I am the head of sales of Goldcast, the illustrious company putting on the virtual event here, or I shouldn't say putting it on, but providing the platform for which this is all happening. So hopefully everyone is enjoying it. My experience ranges, over the last 15 years in SaaS, selling to everyone from, IT to finance to sales and marketing. Mostly at earlier stage startups, but ranging from that to, post IPO. So excited, I love building. So this subject is very near and dear to my heart.
Thank you so much, Mike. We also have Kim Walsh.
Thanks, Dean. Hi, everyone. Kim Walsh here. I am the VP of Go-to-Market Partnerships at HubSpot. What that means is figuring out how we go to market with a bunch of our partners. I've been at HubSpot for quite some time, starting different revenue groups, so building up their enterprise sales team, and also the partnership side of the business, which is a lot of fun, and then also an investor and an advisor. So I really run all things startups at HubSpot, which is a really great spot to be. So really grateful and happy to be here with all of you. Like Catherine said, I love this topic.
Thank you so much, Kim. And then we have a good friend, Hannah, who says, sales, sales, sales.
I'm not sure I'm saying that, but I'm very happy to be here. Right now I'm the chief of staff and head of sales at Surge. We help hourly workplaces transition from a world where there were more people than jobs to a world where there are more jobs than people. And I've been fortunate to have joined the company right before we made a really interesting product pivot to what we're doing today, and really helped build that go-to-market strategy starting from zero and crossing that $1 million ARR mark. So I'm really in the trenches right now, building out some of these sales processes. And so really excited to learn from the other panelists and share my own experiences. Now, I've got about 7 years of sales and account management experience selling to financial services, in-house legal, consulting firms, building and growing teams, both kind of in the professional services sphere and SaaS with legal tech, and now here at Surge. So got a multitude of experience to bring over a few short years, and looking forward to sharing it with everybody and seeing what I can learn in the process.
Thank you so much, Jack. Congratulations on $1 million. And also welcome to all our panelists. Now we have a poll up, and if you could start the poll. We want to make sure that we are covering the areas that benefit our audience. So if you could just go ahead and tell us, what stage of your company, or if you're not venture back, if you're bootstrapped either, or venture seeking, I should say. Also, just want to say, I'm in New Jersey. I'm not sure where everyone else is, because I know this is a virtual group. So if everyone could just tell us quickly where you are.
Sure.
I'm in Boston. I don't know about anyone else.
Okay.
I'm also just outside of Boston.
I'm outside of Boston as well. Yeah.
All right. So I'm the odd one out. My claim to fame, my first job was in Cambridge. I used to live in Cambridgeport, back when it was working class. I understand now that you have to be a millionaire near Central Square. I understand you have to be a millionaire now to live near Central Square. So that is my claim to fame when it comes to Boston. So I have a lot of Boston connections. So the poll is over. And we see we have Bootstrap Other 41%, Pre-Seed 30%, Seed 17%, and Series B and Beyond 12%. So we can go straight into our first question. And since we have 40% that's Bootstrap or Other, our first question is, as a startup founder, how do you know or choose a problem to solve? How do you think about market size? And how do you approach that market? So I guess Catherine or Jack, and then we have Mike and Kim afterwards.
Sure. So I'm sorry. Could you just repeat the question really quickly?
I'm sorry. Sorry, Catherine. As a startup founder, how do you know or choose a problem to solve? How do you think about market size? How do you approach that market?
Okay, so for me, it was, I looked back at my career and how I've had to reinvent myself many times. And one of the biggest challenges was I really didn't have a deep bench of advisors in my back pocket to tap into for advice. So, and a lot of women, and especially underrepresented founders, have the same problem. So I was trying to figure out how I could solve for that. And one of the things is I always encourage folks, especially in the early stages, you know, it's always great to do surveys and things like that, but you have to get out from behind your computer and actually go talk to people. So of course, when, you know, before the pandemic, I went to every meetup within a 25-mile radius of Boston, every women's meetup, and I pretended that I was an investor. Well, it wasn't really pretend because I was an investor in my own company, and said, you know, I'm thinking about investing in this company. It does this. And I got really elicited, you know, like true feedback. And then folks would say, well, if you have this network, can I take part in it? So people would send me messages and I'd send them an invoice, right, for the calls. So at that point, I saw that I had something. You know, when you mention about market size, I think one of the things that I want to caution folks on is, you know, obviously market size matters, but at the end of the day, like, you don't get enamored with the market size. Focus on customer 1, customer 10, customer 100, right? So it's really more systematic than that. But I really focused in on a niche of small businesses and career and professionals, and then I built from there.
Thank you so much. And Jack?
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. Before I jump into my answer, I'm just curious, Catherine, what questions were you asking folks? Like when you got out in the field and were talking to all these people, I think a lot about the questions that you'd ask to kind of quantify and understand the problem. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, so we had done obviously some, you know, quantitative market research, but really what I was asking them is, you know, what kinds of challenges are you facing? And they were, you know, explain to me, you know, the challenges that they were facing within their business. And then I would say, well, who do you call? How do you find the people? Would it be, you know, is it easier for you to learn this way? Or would it be better if you had someone to call and ask the questions to? So I think one of the other challenges is you have to make sure that, you know, that old saying, if you ask people what they, you know, ask Henry Ford supposedly said, you know, if you ask people what they wanted, they say a faster horse, you know, not a car. So you have to be really, you know, really careful about that. And it was really more because I didn't have WiseHer in my head at that moment. It was just more about how they were, what the specific challenges they were facing and how they were having those challenges solved presently. And then I would introduce a solution that I was thinking of, and would that be helpful to them?
Yeah, I like that a lot, because the way that I think about, you know, choosing which problem to solve or finding a problem to solve, I mean, that you're kind of in one of two buckets, right? You either have a technology where you're looking for a problem and you're trying to kind of like figure out where that technology can address something, or you're looking at different problems and deciding, hey, which problem do I want to solve against? You're looking for a solution to that problem. Personally, I'm not a founder. Right. I have the opportunity, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to work with the founders here at Surge. And, you know, I've been part of the experience for us as we made a dramatic product pivot and having to start over, you know, which was 14 months ago. And for us, it was similar, I guess, to your approach, Catherine, where we really tried to focus on understanding the customer who we thought we were going to solve for, and then doing everything we possibly could to understand every aspect of their world. Like like, what is the universe of problems that they have? Because they're interested in engaging with us for some reason. So what's the universe of problems they have? Where do they fall on their variety of priorities? Who specifically at these customers does it affect? Who else does it affect that's maybe in a different ICP, ideal customer profile? How does it affect them? Why does it affect them? What are they doing? Like, how are they existing without a solution to this problem right now? And by asking these types of questions, at least for us, we were able to start to really conceptualize what a solution might look like and for whom that solution would make the biggest difference. I often tell the story, for us, we had 5 customers at the time that COVID hit, and 4 of the 5 of their businesses went to zero. And we were very grateful and fortunate to have that 5th customer like straight up tell us, listen, guys, that thing I bought you for was fine, but what I could really actually use a lot more help with is this other thing. Can you help us with that? Because we're grasping at straws looking for help. And we jumped into that discovery mode. Is this a you problem or a people like you problem? Who are people like you? Where does it stack up on their priority list? And really kind of digging in. Really like to emphasize that getting out and talking to people is how you're going to figure this out. It's not sitting in the armchair kind of pondering. It's getting out in the field and talking to folks.
Thanks, Jack. And Kim, I'm wondering what you have to add. Being at HubSpot, I'm sure you've seen it on both sides in terms of the market.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Catherine and Jack said, I would just pull on the theme, right? So, and my hope is, in telling the story, maybe someone out there finds value in it. But in order to scale a sales team, so when I joined HubSpot, we were about 80 people. Fast forward to today, 5,000, 6,000 people. And looking back in our early stage, the number one question that helped our go-to-market team scale and grow was literally asking the question, what is your biggest challenge? We asked that on our website. We asked that on the form. And that's what our marketing team, because marketing controlled the website, they asked that question. As a founder, you can ask that question. And then the answer is gold. So the biggest thing around like scaling your go-to-market engine is like putting yourself on mute when you ask that really great question and you get that nugget, and then you just listen to what they say. So hopefully that's helpful, but looking back, that was probably the single biggest thing between marketing and sales and even product and, driving revenue and growing and scaling the company was largely like, what's your biggest challenge? Put myself on mute, them tell us. And then our whole message was like, here's how we help. And what a really cool way to sell. It felt very different than selling office equipment early on in my career. And it felt very much like I had, pride in. I was helping a lot of different businesses on a day-to-day basis. It felt more like a growth consultant. So those two things really just, it was like, what's your biggest problem? And here's how we can help.
And thank you so much. That is really good insights. And Mike?
Yeah, I'll just add to that quickly. Everyone made a lot of good points there, so I won't kind of like just reiterate the same things. But, I think one of the big misconceptions, and probably the reason a lot of people don't start businesses, they have this impression that like, well, there's already someone out there solving this problem a little bit. But guess what? Anything worthwhile solving, there are going to be a bunch of people out there. I think it's important, kind of what everyone said here, is like get out of your own bubble and just start talking to people and just like sanity checking, some of your assumptions around not just the problem, but maybe is there a different way of solving the problem, that might be like really interesting. And then I think a lot of it is, zeroing, kind of what Catherine said, is like zero in on the individuals, not just like this behemoth market of people, out there. Is like just start to, figure out how to get a few over the line, those bright spots. And kind of build off of those. Now, what's interesting is, I think a few of us are not actual founders, although I've worked for several founder CEOs and things like that. But the second part of the question about sizing the market, people may not like this answer, but from what I've seen, granted, there's other ways of doing this, is like basically find some industry number that's the biggest one you can find. And if it says hundreds of billions, trillion, exactly. We get
Exactly.
1% of a trillion. I know, like, it's there's all these other things factored in, but seemingly that is how a lot of them do it. The better you can answer that question, obviously, the better. But I think you can make a lot of really good businesses without capturing some huge portion of some huge market. So I wouldn't get too caught up in that. Although when you start to get the bigger investors, they do love a huge TAM. I will say that.
Yeah.
So this is really interesting because, as you said, there's a bias towards, total available market, total customizable market, and having a small sliver of a big pie. But I think what you guys have said is really great because you're giving the founders some real good nuggets how they can actually start the company without being blown away. Oh, I don't have this really large market. And so moving on, in terms of design a sales process, how do you design it, and how do you know what stages you're moving through? And I guess start with Catherine. If we start with that.
I started to go.
I guess. Go ahead.
Design. Well, I mean, especially for the early stage folks out there, like designing a sales process is kind of the backbone of the, it's a building block process in my view. So what I do is what I've done, because I've sold so many different things, is what I do is I try to continuously break it down into different blocks. And I use an old school tool, probably for, most of you out there laugh, but we call them sales playbooks. And it's a very simple document, and I put in there like my, my target market, what their pain points are, how do we uniquely solve them, some things about competitors. I would put in things about like emails that worked, that people got, that people responded to, or LinkedIn messages that I did, or different kinds of things. What this does is it helps me kind of keep track of how I've, honed the sales process, what I'm hearing, the feedback from the customers. And then when I do start building a sales team, I'll be able to take that and then translate it over. Now, you mentioned about, what stages they're moving through. Are you talking about like the sales funnel? Is that what you mean by that?
It's a sales funnel, but I think it was more in terms of as the company grows, how do you know how to adjust the sales process, and how do you know where you are?
Oh, okay. So for me, I am always adjusting the sales process. I'm one of those people who I try to, obviously it's much easier now, everything's virtual, but like I record all of my sales calls.
Oh, wow.
I hate listening to myself, but I make myself do it, because part of it, like Kim mentioned about the listening. So many salespeople, and especially founders, were really excited about our idea. So we forget to stop and listen and take in what our customer is saying. So I'm very critical of my own, sales skills, and I'm constantly adjusting as I go. But Jack, you had mentioned too that your customers will feed back to you if you take the time to listen and elicit this kind of advice from them. Is they will say to you, hey, this is really great, but I'd really like this, or can you solve this problem too, or this is the problem that we have. So it is a process. It's not quick and easy, but it's definitely something that I would recommend, especially all early stage founders do. And then even as you grow, it's constantly looking back to see where you were, where you are, and where you're going.
Thank you so much. And Kim, if you want to add to that as well.
Yeah, Catherine's a great person to go first. I think the key things are pretty similar to what she said, but maybe I'll try and just generalize it in the sense of, I'm a big fan of picking a framework, right? There's like, you can pick, if you have a complex product out there, maybe Medic is great, Bant is good, you could create your own. They all get down to the same the same structure, which is like, as you are learning how to do sales, or as you are a founder doing sales, because many of them have to and should in the beginning, you don't just build a product and people will come. That you have to talk to them and understand their pain points, is to pick a framework, and follow it. And then again, I think as Dean, you may have mentioned, like, how do you get ready to grow and scale the company is, who are your best sellers? If it's yourself as a founder, you have to think about, it's a West Coast concept of like, how do I give my Legos away, or how do I scale myself? Because you can't be involved in every deal. So you have to think about how you're going to train other individuals.
Right.
Who are the best people and what are they doing and what are the themes? Great technologies out there today allow you to record the calls, transcribe them, see your talk time versus someone else's talk time. What a great time to be a seller. And then I think that's just really cool because so many companies are just investing in, sales and marketing. It's really hard to find engineering talent and sales talent. So right. It's really, really needed out there. But just to bring it back, pick the framework and then figure out how you're going to scale yourself or the top sellers at your company.
Okay. And Mike, if you want to add to this as well.
Yeah, I really liked what Kim said there about picking the framework because, and I think sometimes this almost can scare people off of these frameworks that they've never seen, but it's almost like a workout, right? It doesn't matter if you're doing well, probably does, but I'm going to make the analogy anyway. It doesn't matter if you're doing CrossFit or you're using a shake weight every day. If you are consistently getting a workout, that is better than the inconsistency of doing things. So that was the point I took away there. The other thing is, I think you have to understand your customer's journey. I think the mistake a lot of people make is they try and force the journey into their process versus the other way around. Understand in those first couple of sales, how do you go about buying something like this and then building your process around it to make sure you're addressing it. And then, from a scaling perspective, I think generally what happens as you scale is you start to get more specialized, right? In terms of what each person is doing in terms of their roles and things like that. And so that changes the sales process in some ways. But the other thing is, as you grow, if you're doing, and you don't need complex tools to really do this, is, you basically, understand kind of the different stages of your process / their, customer journey of how they buy. And then it's really just a matter of getting some understanding of how many people make it from one stage to the next stage to the next stage. And then just analyzing hey, where are we getting caught? What is the things that we're, getting caught up on moving the most people from one to the next? And then starting to just fill those gaps, whether that's with resources, changes to the product, changes to the messaging. But, it allows you to understand where to focus in on versus just kind of sometimes maybe getting defeated by you're not seeing all the results you want. It's just keep zeroing in on each piece. Now, I will tell you, typically speaking, it starts at the top of the funnel in earlier stages. But ultimately, pick a framework, stick with it, pick one that also I think makes sense, kind of to the point of, I think Catherine was saying, Medic might, which is, known for being more like an enterprise solution, might make a lot more sense than if you're selling something more transactional. You might want to keep it super simple and use, a lot of people don't like to use BANT, which is budget, authority, need, timing. But something simpler like that you can move through, I think is, well suited for smaller purchases. But just pick something, stay consistent, measure it, and just continue to iterate. That's, the best way, in my opinion.
Thanks, Mike. And Jack?
Yeah, going last is interesting to try and figure out how do I add value in addition to what everybody else said. So let me see if I can do that for folks. Having a sales process is totally dependent on who you're selling to. And so I think all of this sort of presumes you have a good idea of who you're going after, because you might find that the sales process looks pretty different depending on who you're selling to. I think what really helps me thinking about this is different questions you could ask yourself to start building it. And I think Kim, it was either Kim or Mike, you were talking about the buyer's journey. I think you really have to start assuming you know who you want to sell to or whose problem you're trying to solve. Start by straight up asking these people, what is the process that you would need to go through in order to make a decision on this? And don't be afraid to literally ask them this question. When you've made decisions like this in the past, how have you gone about making that decision? Who else was involved? What were the different component parts of that? And ask people and find out how they actually make this decision. And then think to yourself, what would I need to do to actually help somebody make a decision? And set them up for success, manage their expectations. What are the things that I need to do? And then layer these two things on top, what they need to do first and foremost, most important, and what you need to do to really manage their expectations. And then apply the BANT, apply the MEDDIC, whatever it is on top of that, but really starting on understanding what those processes are. And then I want to reiterate another thing folks talked about, but from like a real world experience of my own, like having the playbook and actually documenting it is so important. I personally, which I will own, made the mistake of being a little loose and fast at the beginning of this. Like, we were starting from scratch. We were trying to figure things out. So we were throwing a lot of paint on the wall and seeing what stuck. But if you don't take the time to document what you're doing and what your hypotheses are, you end up kind of like 6 months in with a lot of, finger in there. I think our sales cycle is this long. I think this is what's happening. And you have to end up spending a lot of time working backwards. And that's time you're not spending working forwards. And so I would really encourage folks to, in as lightweight as possible, do the little bit extra legwork to document what you're doing so that you can effectively iterate. And I see like 40% of folks are bootstrapped, so maybe it doesn't apply. Maybe you're not going out to raise money, but if you are raising money, you are going to get these questions and they're going to expect you to answer these questions in a timely manner. And if you're then going back through 6 months of calendar invites to figure out what your sales process is, that's going to be a tough couple of days, and they're not going to be stoked that it took you a couple of days to get them the answer. So just like pothole alert, I would spend the time to document.
Thank you so much. This is really great insights. The next question is for Kim. You're getting it first now. What do you think about building your initial go-to-market team, and how much should be founder-led versus someone you hire from outside?
I mean, I think that's a good question. I guess I don't think I have like the right answer. I'll just share my perspective on it, where I think early stage founder led, even if you're bootstrapped for a while, like it's got to be founder led, because you're the person kind of like in charge of the fate of what's happening. So I think founder led to a certain point, and how you understand where I talked a little bit about like giving away your Legos or scaling yourself, like. What functions are you working on? Maybe as an early founder, you're supporting product, and then you have to do customer success and answer the phone a lot. And then you have to do sales, and like you're doing it all. I think there comes a moment where you have to think about like, okay, we're acquiring customers at this rate, or I've reached a certain revenue amount. Things seem to be going well. I think the key indicator question is like, are you acquiring customers and keeping them, or are you acquiring customers and losing them? If you're acquiring customers and keeping them, you have to think about the signal to yourself around like, all right, when do we scale? And do I hire another seller? And how do I enable them to help the business grow and scale? So that's a little bit about how I think about it. Maybe a different perspective of someone who's sort of like living and breathing it every day, about how you decide as a founder, or when you're in the thick of it, how you decide to double down. We look a lot at metrics. We look a lot at the data. We look a lot around like productivity per individual. But I think the key thing as a founder is like, you got to figure out where your time is best spent. And it's probably making sure your, product is being built, and you're acquiring customers, and you're keeping your customers pretty happy, and they're not leaving you.
And Catherine, if you want to add to that as well.
Yeah, this is kind of one of those founder traps, I think, in some ways, where, I make the analogy of, you hear people say sometimes like, oh, I would love to start a restaurant or a bar. I'll just hire someone to manage it, right? It doesn't work that way. It's the same thing with when you're starting out initially, is you have to be your best seller. And no, it's not easy, and not everyone can be a seller at scale, but it's your idea, it's your passion. You've hopefully done the back work and the market research to support this. So in order to be able to, attract top sales talent when it's time to hire that person, you have to show not only some traction, but it is, again, it's a myth that you can just hire a salesperson. They're going to come in and they're going to know everything about your product, how to sell it, who to sell it to. They're going to be looking for you to guide them along that way. So It has to be founder led in the beginning. And then, if it's not something that's super comfortable for you, I would hire sooner rather than later. But in terms of hiring, you have to make sure that you're giving them the tools to be successful. And, professional sellers like the folks on this call, we make it look easy, but as I mentioned, it's not. It takes years and years of practice. So you want to make sure that you're in a position to pay, salespeople what they need to, be incentivized to sell your product.
Oh, great insights. And Jack, since you're talking about sales and I know you're driving towards your 1 million and working on the next 2 million.
Yeah, well, we're working on the next 10 or 100. So
sorry, next 2 billion.
Yeah. We got to throw around the B and the T words here. Mike was doing that at the beginning with the market sizing. Yeah, we'll take trillions. Sounds nice. So, yeah, think about this in a couple of ways. I think one, I'm in full agreement on needs to be founder-led at the start. I think you do have to think about what are your highest leverage as a founder. Where are you most levered or leveraged? Is it in product? Is it in customer success? Is it in sales? And kind of making decisions according to that. I really like Mark Robert's framework on this with the science of scaling. Awesome book. Like, read it if you're a founder. It's almost like a reference guide. Super, super useful.
What was the name of that book again, Jack?
The Science of Scaling.
Okay.
It's quite good. But the way he kind of thinks about it or outlines it is, startups here, there are 3 different phases: product market fit, go to market fit, and growth and mode. And at each one of these stages, the persona of the ideal seller is different. So if you're just starting out, the person that you want to sell when you're in that product market fit stage, when you're still not totally sure if the solution that you have is meaningfully solving a problem for a big enough set of customers to build a business around it, the salesperson that you hire is totally different than when you're growing like gangbusters and you have a really clearly defined process and you just need to execute it. It's almost coin operated. Those are totally different personas. So when you're looking to make that first hire, there's like a couple of different things that I would recommend looking out for. Like, don't immediately go hire some fancy VP of sales type person, because that's not the person who's really, really good at running sales teams is probably not the person who's best to take over sales from the founder. You're almost looking for like a hybrid product manager / account executive, because that early sales, which is why as a founder you should do it, is as much about learning about the problem as it is about selling the solution, which is why you need this to be like such a tight feedback loop between what you're learning in sales calls and what you're actually building. When you're in that go-to-market fit stage where like, okay, you think what you're selling is actually solving a meaningful problem, as Kim talked about, you're retaining these customers and there's clear indications that you're going to retain these customers. You got to hire folks who are good at building process, who can take this initial success and start to crystallize it into something that can eventually scale. And that persona is totally different. This is like a process builder. This is somebody who can see what's working and start to put systems and frameworks around it and start to like document this stuff. And then once it's all documented and it's clear the unit economics like more or less work with the leads and the conversions, like you hire the folks who can take the playbook and execute like that. And you take the folks who are really good at managing those people, like their VPs of sales or top-notch sales managers, and you hire them to run those teams and build those teams. But you definitely don't start there. And I think that's like a pretty easy trap to fall into. These aren't my ideas, though I have tried to execute against them. Again, could not plug Mark's book enough. It's quite good.
Thank you. And Mike?
You're on mute, Mike.
Oh, hold on. There we go. So I won't spend too much time on this one. I think Jack actually nailed a lot of it, and I would actually point you towards probably the exact same book. Someone who's kind of been through it now. I'm on my third, go around of this. Like, I can't stress enough the importance of the CEO, founder, selling, testing the assumptions, like just getting out there and really like being in the thick of it and like seeing where the rubber meets the road. Because otherwise it's like, I will say, and maybe I've been that person, the sales guy who was in too early. It's like, you know, the expectation is things are just going like to the moon already, and it's like we haven't even figured out if we got a thing to sell yet.
Yeah.
And so like the companies I've seen be the most successful, the founders are in there early. But I will say this also, you have to get past the stage of like friends and family, because I've also seen that, which is, you know, you sign a dozen customers, you say we have product market fit, we have 12 customers, they're all either friends or friends of the investors, and you know they're doing a favor buying it. So you have to like, I feel like have a half a dozen of the like true customers that you've driven, you know, and then you start to bring in like the salespeople. I totally agree also, do not bring in that big company VP manager. That ain't gonna work. Like you need someone who can get in the trenches and, you know, really refine the messaging, build that all that initial foundational structure and things like that. But yeah, there is also then, if you're fortunate enough to get to the place where like that person probably, you know, maybe there's other things they do, but eventually you want those, you know, those process people who are gonna, you know, build something that is very much scalable once you've had someone already figure out kind of like what that foundation is.
Thanks, Mike. And so we can have one more questions, and then we're going to go to the question and answers from the audience to see they're already been populating. The next question is sort of related to the first one, so you guys don't have to spend too long on it. So basically, it was the go-to-market mix, whether it's product-led, go-to-market versus outbound, inbound versus partner versus referral. And if possible, if you guys can give some metrics and actual products that you use, because some in the audience want to know what software, what different products you use in utilizing some of these sales processes. Or you can put it in the chat as well. Oh, sorry, Jeffrey.
Sure. Well, I'm a, you know, especially at the early stage, you know, I'm a huge collaborator, and I always look for the one-to-many. So I am, how we scaled initially with WiseHer was, I went and I formulated a number of partnerships with a lot of women's organizations, co-marketing arrangements, what have you. And we just signed a 2-year relationship with Staples. That was in the last 6 months. So, you know, so I'm really about the one-to-many. So that's how I usually will attempt to attack the market. I mean, especially in the beginning when we were focused more on the direct-to-consumer, well, it really wasn't direct-to-consumer, but it was, you know, B to very small b. We're actually more into a SaaS play right now, but at that point, you know, I mean, you can't knock on every door, you know, so you really need to focus on that one-to-many. So, you know, and a lot of, you know, I love inbound leads, don't get me wrong. And there was a question in there about, you know, we got our first customer, should I do SEO? Well, you should do SEO, but an inbound strategy, while very effective, takes a long time, right? And it takes time, and time sometimes that startups don't have. So you're going to need to go out and actually get customers. So partnerships, any kind of collaborations you can do from the one-to-many, but then you actually are going to have to pick up the phone or go to LinkedIn or, you know, use a social selling strategy to get customers in the door.
Okay, Kim, if you had anything to add to that.
I think just think about your channels and your mix. You know, I see more and more companies investing now in partnerships. Like, let's say, you know, maybe you're running a little bit of a different model in the beginning, maybe more than Catherine is around building partnerships right up front. I love that strategy. I also think some companies invest pretty heavily in like traditional sales and marketing to do outbound. You know, maybe you hire a BDR function. Maybe you have like chat on your website. There are a few companies, you know, a bunch of companies do that. HubSpot does it, Drift does it, Zendesk does it. You know, there's a bunch of companies out there that do chat. You know, maybe you start to see who's coming to your website and what questions they have as a inbound channel. Then you have your outbound channel. Then you have PQL, so product-led growth. That's like if you have a freemium strategy or users, you know, how many monthly active users do you have? I always love the PLG strategy around free or monthly or weekly active users, because that's just the pool of people that are interested in your product or service. And now you can hire a sales team and figure out how to scale monetizing that group. You know, are they finding value in your paid version? So then that's like figuring out pricing and packaging, which is a whole nother piece to figure out. But other than that, there's partnerships, PLG, outbound, inbound. And then I wrote down another one, which I think is, we kind of bucketed into a lot of them, but I will tell you, there's a study that we did at HubSpot that 50% of our current customer base refers a new customer to HubSpot. So don't underestimate the power of keeping a happy customer and doing a referral, because if you can delight your customers, they'll refer more to you, which is a really good viral effect.
Referrals. The sales 101. It still works. And Mike, you want to add something? And then we have Jack to do cleanup.
Yeah. So my whole thing is a couple things. First of all, the referral thing, that is 100% where I started. Like, use those, those, people, anyone in your network, have no shame in asking for introductions and all those things. In terms of the mix, I think it very much depends on your product and price point and things like that, because, if you're selling a $3,000 a year product, it might be hard to justify an outbound motion. Inbound sounds great. And certainly I wish, right, at every company that solved all the problems, but to everyone's point, it takes a long time. So I certainly would not depend on it too much. I would focus on, although I will say I would definitely focus on like the branding element, so that like as you are, maybe even if it's not a huge volume of people, when you do successfully drive people to your website, aka your storefront to a large extent, that you are really getting across your point, and it's not like you did all that work to get them and then they were kind of scared off by the what they saw. I'll call it a little bit of let's call it, a hack right now that I think can be really good is, again, it totally depends on your product and things like that, but and it sounds cliche, but influencers can be incredibly helpful for you right now. If if there's certain people in your industry, right, have a good following, I mean, right, that's just another form of referral, really. But, just in all walks of life, influencers are becoming a bigger trend. And so I think, if you can find a couple of those people to, even if you got to give them your product and get them on right and just get them talking about you to the right people, that's gold.
Thanks, Mike and Jack. And then we go to questions.
Yeah, and I'll make it somewhat quick because I'm mostly reiterating Mike's point, and folks probably hate this, but I think context matters so much. Like, I think a lot of people want there to be an answer. Like in 2021, in September 2021, this is how you sell. And it's just not true. Like, there are things that you don't do in 2021, generally speaking. But like the product context, like what you're actually selling and how it works matters a ton. The buyer's context matters a ton. Your own company's context and culture matters a ton. And so I would bring it back to really understanding the customer and the problem that you're trying to solve and working backwards from there. Like, if you sell something that is ultimately going to be priced at a couple $100,000, inbound, like SEO, like, is that how people are going to buy your product? I don't know. Maybe not. If it's really well, let me take a step back. I would just talk to your customers a lot, all of these people, and ask them, hey, when you buy stuff, how did it happen? How did you first hear about it? And do a ton of research about how they already behave and hear about things. And it may not be the case that your strategy is exactly what they say, but you're going to learn a lot about how these people behave. We sell into restaurant franchisees. These are owners, independent business owners of like anywhere from 5 to 200 McDonald's, Dunkin', Domino's, right? Our sales cycle's real short. The average contract value's really low. But as it turns out, these people are on their phones all of the time. They're moving from place to place. And so if you call them, they pick up their phones like 1 in 5 times. You can close a deal on a cold call in our market. And so, an outbound strategy kind of does work. It's going to be one of the things that we continue to execute against, because if 1 in 5 people pick up and 1 in 3 of those people either agrees to a meeting or buys the software on that call, you only need to make 15 calls to sell or to get a meeting. that's pretty good. And so all of that's to say, like, context really matters. Really try and understand why you would go one way or another. Yeah, like, iterate it over time. You can't win being a one-trick pony. Like, you can win early being a one-trick pony, like having one thing that works. But I would spend maybe, like, the 80-20 rule, 80% of your time on the stuff that's working, 20% of your time experimenting with other channels, because you're going to want to have 2 to 3 go-to-market channels for you, like, that are successful.
Thank you, Jack. We just got the bell. And you got about 10 more minutes, and we have 6 questions. So the first question, actually, the question 2 and 3 are directly to Catherine. So Catherine, hold on for a second. But the first, or you could answer this one too. But the first question is, and anyone can answer this question. Shall we focus on the technical, it's from Rita Ma. Shall we focus on the technical problems, a specific type of work we are solving, or the business problem, the business impact the work is trying to create?
The business impact, absolutely.
Yeah. So anyone could take this.
Sorry.
I mean, I'm going to say 100% the business impact to me is the thing. I mean, who cares what it does if it doesn't actually move the needle on something related to the business? But maybe that's just the sales guy saying that.
Cool.
No,
And, so go ahead.
I was saying 100%. People buy when they have pain, period. End of discussion. Right. So you're either, solving for internal pain, like, I want a promotion, I want to look good. There's some kind of internal struggle. Right. There's a problem. Someone has to solve it, and that someone's your customer. Or external, time, money, or time is money. So it's all about the business impact. That's how people buy.
That's great. And Catherine, the next 2 are for you. First one is from Perry Salmanovich. Hope I didn't mess up your name. What are some different software that tracks, analyzes, and transcribes sales call?
So actually, Kim may be a better person because she has a much bigger organization. But I've used Gong in the past. I've used, I've done, just taken the Zoom call, the recordings, and I've gone to Temi. That there's Otter AI. There's a bunch of them. I put it in the chat. But Kim, you may have some other tools that you guys use at HubSpot.
Yeah, feel free to put it in the chat, anyone.
Great.
Yeah, Gong, I would say, is the Mercedes-Benz to some extent, right? There's some up-and-comers if you're a little more limited in terms of resources. There's one called Wingman that's a little bit, on the up and up, but that's another one you might want to try.
Chorus, I think they're...
Oh, Chorus, yeah.
Okay. And then, Catherine, they want to know, next question, how do you document your sales playbook and ensure that they get followed by your sales force? Any software platforms to manage that workflow?
I don't use a software platform. I have like a Google Doc that I use. It's easy for me to take notes. It's easy for me to, move things around. And, and how you make sure it gets followed. I think in the beginning, sometimes, I'll step in. We don't have a sales force right now because we're very early stage. But as I was building my old sales teams, I would listen in the background to sales calls. Those are the types of things you can do. It doesn't have to be, 100% followed. If you are hiring experienced salespeople, they'll kind of have their own spin on it. But in the beginning, I would keep a little bit tabs on folks and then ask them for feedback too. Like have them, put their input into the sales playbook too as they go. They may find a different angle than I would have.
Thank you. And
tools that they use on the panel.
I put a couple in the chat.
Thank you.
I feel good about saying that HubSpot has a free tool that you can use.
Okay.
So there's a free tool there. Airtable, Notion, Apollo's one that I'm hearing. There's a lot in terms of workflow management or CRM, whatever you decide that you want to call what you need.
Yeah,
which is good.
One thing to if people are intimidated by these things, you can definitely start with Google Docs and Google Sheets as V1, and then a free tool from HubSpot is always good. We use HubSpot the paid version, but you don't need to get super techie with this stuff at the early stage. Don't overcomplicate it.
And Jack, could you put the book in the chat for Jameer missed it. Thank you so much. So any advice, this question is for anyone, any advice on early stage B2B that just got one customer? How do you continue from here? I think Catherine may have answered this before. Shall we do SEO or just focus on direct sales? Anyone can answer this one.
Yeah, I think Catherine said do both, right?
Yeah, how did you get your first customer? But I would, however, if it's B2B early stage, SEO is way too passive in my opinion, but the other folks can comment in.
Yeah, I would agree. Go out and get those people, right? Especially early on, you want to be super focused. So, and right, you can just use LinkedIn to get a good sense of like who exactly, you want to go after, depending on the product, of course. But I would go after that, like waiting on SEO. I think you're going to be disappointed, especially early on if you haven't built out a brand and things like that. Just go get those right people. And, don't rely on just email because everyone's getting killed on email. Like be creative, try and come up with new ways. But yeah, I would go get them. I wouldn't wait for people to come to me.
So, Mike, are you doing your TikTok presentation to your new customers?
Oh yeah.
I heard that's the rage right now.
I dance in the videos. Yes.
Send me the link. I'll pay for that. And the next question is, what frameworks are best for relatively easy to use, relatively easy to understand products? And anybody could answer this one.
I think this is the selling frameworks we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And so it's interesting. There's technically selling, like there's sales process and then there's the sales methodology. So I'm not 100% sure which one we're talking about here in terms of frameworks, but just a couple that I personally like and think work pretty well in the simpler selling is gap selling is a great one. I personally prescribe to, and then you can keep it simple with something like BANT, budget, authority, need, time frame, or ANM, authority, need, urgency, money. They all are essentially the same thing. Do they have juice to do something? Do they have a need? Is there a time frame? Can they get the money?
Sounds good. And anyone else? Unless anyone else, I just want to make sure I get through all the questions. What scenarios are the best to outsource lead generations? I think you guys answered that before, but you could expound. Kim or Catherine?
I mean, my answer to this one is sort of, I don't think you should outsource this at the beginning, right? I think you really want to keep close to it. Mike just mentioned, you want to go out and get your customers and kind of be in control. I think there are definitely phases or stages where you can outsource to grow and scale. And there's a bunch of companies out there. I don't know any off the top of my mind, but I know you can do sort of like group. Yeah. Oh yeah, the bridge group. Yeah, maybe
female founded ones.
Great. But yeah, I guess my point of view is like, I don't think you want to outsource that early on.
Okay, thank you.
You don't want to outsource it early on, but also too, I think Jack mentioned too. I mean, if you're selling a product for 3,000 or selling a project for 300, like that's going to, formulate, it's going to be part of your formulation of whether or not you can even afford to outsource it and how much does it cost per lead, like all that kind of stuff. So it really just depends on the product. But as you mentioned, Kim, like early on, it really has to be you. Okay,
thank you. And the last question, Satish is asking, we've spent a lot of time on tools. Talking of tools, what about chat bots off of websites and personalization? And this is the type of thing, if you guys have anything specific, you can also put it in the chat.
Yeah, I can put it in the chat. I mentioned a few.
And we are coming up on time, so we only have like 2 or 3 minutes left. So Dean, I'm not sure if we want to have panelists maybe give like their last thoughts or takeaways on how to form a great sales strategy.
Yes, thank you so much for this illustrious panel. And we start from the top and do clockwise from my point of view. So that'll be Catherine once again, lead off.
Well, I think my biggest thing I'd love you to take away from this is, really, really figure out who that person is, who that target audience, avatar, whatever it is that you want to sell. What are you solving? What pain point are you solving? And focus on that. Formulate your own sales strategy as the founder and then build on top of that.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, my advice just generally around this stuff is don't be intimidated. Like don't overcomplicate it. I think, a few people said that a bunch of times here. It's real simple. Figure out the process by which people, figure out obviously who you is the right, group of people you're going after. Figure out how they buy things, and then just start to just measure, right? Like I said, of like how well you're able to get them through that process, and just tweak it and iterate it. Don't by any means think you're going to come out of the gates with like the right way of doing it. Just be prepared to evolve it, and make sure you're just like being very aware and like listening and seeing what's happening at each stage versus just kind of throwing it all into like one big bucket of like wins and losses. Try and really get into the details of it.
Thank you. And Kim?
Sure. I would say keep it simple. I love some of the questions that kind of pushed us to simplify some of our answers. I would say keep it simple, and yeah, keep it simple in execution. Pretty important.
And Jack?
Don't make assumptions. Listen really, really closely to what people are saying and ask them a ton of questions. It's much more about listening than it is about like pitching. And one final pitch or plug, if any folks are not founders and are salespeople right now, we are hiring at Surge. Shamelessly, I will say, if you like anything that I'm saying, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I would love to have a conversation with you about joining our team.
Thank you. I want to thank our illustrious panel. Thank you, everyone, for your great insights and your words of wisdom. And Stephanie, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Really, really appreciate it. Dean, thank you for leading the conversation. And to our attendees, we do have another sales panel coming up in like 14 minutes. So I hope you'll stick around and learn more. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much again. Have a good one, guys.
Thank you, everybody.